Thank you all for coming here. Super quick, my name is Tim Medin. I run a pen test company. We've got a bunch of cool shirts. Stop by, get some free swag. Been a pen tester forever. Taught all over the place, do other stuff. I hate intro slides, so we'll go to the next one. How many of you folks, out of curiosity, how many of you folks are like on the blue side? Wow, all right, managers. Okay, I'll talk slower. Auditors, red team, some of you, marketing, finance, what the hell, what are some of you? Poor choices? Yeah, okay, fair enough. That's why I'm here as well. Good deal. But throughout my talks, I like to have these things be interactive. If you have questions along the way, feel free to ask. Like to keep this interactive. How many of you, out of curiosity, are dealing with your dashboards at work and you're like, my God, I didn't even finish the sentence, and you guys are like, yep, I don't know what are you gonna say, but it's gonna go sideways, and it's definitely me. Deal with these dashboards, and you're like, we're never gonna get out from underneath this thing. What in the world do we do? Now you can do that. No one's gonna raise their hand now. All right, scared you. Cool. Yeah, and I see this time and time again. I get a lot of these calls from people, and we have like an Ask the Expert kind of a thing where they're like, hey, in our Nessus, our Nexpos, whatever the thing is, we have 1 million, is probably a nice round number of things, and I don't know what to do with those things. But if there's one thing that bosses love, dashboards, right? You make them so happy with dashboards, and they like to use words like KPI because then they can show off to their MBA friends. And then all this crap kind of rolls downhill to the rest of us. The question is, are these incentives correct? I feel like I'm like you know how bats echolocate? I'm like doing that, but like in a terrible, terrible way. Like, oh, hi squeaky, turn, all right. Right? Like, are the incentives correct? Are we tracking the right things? Just because we track them doesn't mean any of those things are true. And I'm getting things accomplished. I'm knocking things out of my dashboard, but is it making a difference? The boss man's like, hey, great work. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't even really do anything. Like, we're not better off in this whole process. You knock out one thing, 5 more show up afterwards, right? It's like the worst Hydra, right? Kill one, get a bunch more, love those. We see this kind of breakdown all the time, right? We have the breakdown between what's urgent and what's important. And this is the ideal. And the bosses and stuff love to look and point at these things, but it's kind of incorrect. Less important, urgent, less, urgent. We want to, if it's urgent and important, do it like right now. And we kind of forget the other quadrant. But the piece that's kind of a lie is urgent is replaced with visible, right? So if it shows up in that dashboard, is it urgent? Maybe not. But does the boss man, do everybody else see it? Do I see it? Do I feel like I need to solve this problem? And oftentimes maybe I don't, right? And we confuse the urgency with, is it visible? Can we see it or not? And to some degree, maybe worse, when things are invisible, we completely ignore them. Like, for example, Active Directory. Designing a secure architecture for Active Directory is a pain in the butt. Those insecurities in Active Directory where you have incorrect permissions and other misconfigurations, they don't show up anywhere. And because it's not as visible, we just pretend it doesn't exist and hope no one looks under the bed for the stuff that we kind of swept up over there, right? So this all comes down to incentives. I love looking at incentives because really, really funky stuff happens. The important thing is you always get what you incentivize. You always get what you incentivize. The question is, did you incentivize the right thing? Right? Are we pushing the right behavior? Are we pushing the right activity? Are we encouraging people to take the right kind of actions? And many times, we don't. And people will get very creative in gaming these incentives. Like, hey, if I do X, Y, and Z, I get a bonus. Cool. I'm going to figure out how most efficiently to do that, and they might not be solving the same problem you are. One of my favorite is the Cobra effect. Now, the situation was in Delhi, there were Cobras everywhere. I mean, this should be the end of the thing. Like, step 1, Cobras. Step 2, move. Like, well, why do I need to live anywhere close to Cobras? Do you know how big those things are? My cousin lived in Malaysia, and she sent us a picture with a Cobra in their backyard. And I'm like, well, that's cool. I hope you enjoyed Malaysia and go literally into place else. But they had an issue with Cobras. They're huge. They're very venomous, very, very dangerous. So they wanted to get rid of the Cobras. So they offered a bounty on the Cobras. Hey, can you hold this? Cool, thanks. They offered a bounty on these Cobras so that people would kill the Cobras. So what the people did is, you can keep that. They offered a bounty on these Cobras, and people started killing the Cobras. So there's fewer Cobras. People are stupid smart. They're like, huh, the final incentive is me making money. And Cobras happen in the middle. How can we game this? They began breeding Cobras. Right? Thanks, man. Appreciate it. They began breeding Cobras so that they could turn in their tail and get more money. So the government's like, well, that didn't work. They killed the bounty, and everyone's like, okay, let's just release the Cobras now. They ended up with more Cobras than they started with. There was a similar situation that happened with rats in Hanoi. Same kind of thing. If you got a rat tail, they would pay you money for it. People would catch the rats, cut the tail off, leave the rats go, because then they could breed and make more tails, and they ended up with a ton more rats. Right? So it's really important to look at incentives as it relates to KPIs, metrics, dashboards, all those kind of fun and interesting things. It's important to focus on what's actually important, not just what's visible. And the example I used a little bit earlier is designing defensible Active Directory architecture, looking at those permissions, cleaning up file shares. Those things don't show up in your dashboards. In the last week or two, have you exploited TLS 1.1? Have you done it ever? Right? I get clients all the time, they're like, oh, but that's, like, do any of you have to fill out those vendor forms? I call it the spreadsheet to save the world. And they ask questions like, are you using TLS 1.2 or later? And I'm like, what if I'm using 1.1? It's like, well, I can easily decrypt that. I was like, challenge accepted. Like, I'll bet $10 versus your $1 million you can't do it, and I'm going to be stupid rich, right? They're like, well, but theoretically, if you transmit 14 terabytes of data, I could decrypt 2 bytes. And I'm like, cool, which 2 bytes do you want? And they're like, whoa, wait, you're not supposed to, I'm like, what 2 bytes do you want? Also, this is theoretical, right? We see stuff like this, a PHP, Apache, Nginx, IIS flaws. I don't know any pen tester that's taken advantage of any of these in 20 years. But is your screen full of them? Absolutely. Are you measured on how quickly you patch these things? I see nodding, a couple of tears, right? So focusing on the correct things. Now, this is one of those situations where not only am I squashing 1 and 5 show up, at the end of the day, are we better off? Arguably, no. Like, we haven't moved the needle here, right? So if we're measuring like the mean time to fix the bug, what's the sort of Cobra effect here? I pick the easiest bugs. I don't pick the difficult, hard one that might make a difference. I'm incentivized for speed. So I pick the easiest ones, not necessarily the important ones. And also, if maybe there's a metric in there related to the more critical ones, is that even the right criticality? I mean, how many times have you seen the PHP flaw ranked as a 10 out of 10 in Nessus or something like that? And I'm not picking on them, because if that specific function is being used with unsanitized user input, which it never is, it is really bad. But no one's ever actually using these weird, funky functions with unsanitized input. Are we doing the right thing here? Are we actually, even if we are doing it based on importance or criticality, is that even right? Are vulnerabilities being recategorized? And what people end up doing far, far too often is using the CVSS as their metric. CVSS says so, so therefore it must be. Here's a little tip. It's all made up. Like, people look at the CVSS and it's like God himself came down and scored this in 9.1. And realistically, it's a guy named Steve in his cube who's like, there's like 9 different categories. It's like medium, high, I don't know, flip a coin, high. And you end up with this number, and we score based on that, right? We need to take a step back and recategorize these things. And there's not often that, a lot of organizations don't have that capability. Their policies, I've seen them explicitly state that they base it on the CVSS. And you're like, first off, you're not using the environmental factors, right? You're not counting any sort of compensating controls, and then you're incentivizing people to fix things like these that have no actual impact, and they're just spinning their wheels and, to some degree, wasting money, right? And I'm not saying patching is not important. I'm not. But I've talked to other pen testers. I know I'm good friends with Ed and John Strand and Dave Kennedy and a few others. I'm like, hey guys, during your pen test, when's the last time you did a traditional memory corruption like exploit? And they're like, I don't know. What year is it? And to be fair though, my sample size is very much, or my sample or our samples are very biased, because if you're hiring pen testers, by definition, you have a more mature security practice, right? But even if you look at like the Verizon data breach report, other than like MoveIt, Fortinet, and who's the other hardware vendor in the last 2 years? Avanti. Other than those 3, there wasn't a lot out there for us, especially that was reliable, right? And are we missing those things that aren't visible, those things we don't have the visibility in? Whether that visibility is we don't want to look over here because then we'll have to fix it, or we just don't know to look there in the first place, right? Now, I was digging on those TLS findings, PHP findings, the others, et cetera. And the feedback I've gotten is, well, what happens if the risk changes? Anybody remember the RDP flaw in Windows from, like, was it 10 years ago now, maybe? Blue Keep, right? That first came out in maybe 10 years ago? I don't remember the date. The date doesn't necessarily matter. But when it first came out, it would crash, but you couldn't actually exploit anything. And then there were rumors that it might be exploitable. And then a few years later, we actually, in Metasploit, got an exploit for that. It wasn't very reliable. But if you've got something like that, what you can't do and effectively manage risk is say, well, what if someday this gets worse? Or else you're never going to get anywhere, you're never going to adjust anything. You just need to track those and say, hey, we'll keep an eye on this. Let's see if it gets worse. Right? You go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, that doesn't look good, but let's keep an eye on it. That sort of scenario, right? Validation. Just because it shows up in fill in the blank thing, is it real? Does it actually exist? Right? And I don't want to pick on the vulnerability scanners. They are doing their job. The problem is we're ingesting it the wrong way. We're not filtering. We're not rescoring. So for example, the PHP thing. Are you using that specific function? Look at the CVE, look for the function, search through the code. Are we using that? If not, no risk, 0 risk. Move on. So let's talk about that CVSS. We've got the CVSS here. Now, first is the name of the company that came up with CVSS. These are their words, their words. It is not recommended to use this alone to determine remediation priority. If you want to go back to your organization with concrete evidence to not use CVSS, you can be like, this is what the CVSS people said. It could be more clear, right? CVSS only takes into consideration the attributes of the vulnerability itself, doesn't include your organizational stuff. May use CVSS as input to organizational vulnerability management process that also considers factors that are not part of CVSS. They're saying don't just use CVSS. Recategorize it yourself. Now, will that take extra effort? Sure. But my guess is when you actually rescore these things, you're not going to have patch monkeys doing meaningless PHP patches. They're now going to be free to help you reprioritize and focus on the things that are actually important, the things that will actually move a needle on a dashboard, right? Actually try to keep a bad guy out of the organization. So we want to make sure we rescore those. Look at the real risk. Do we have compensating controls? Do we have other things that will protect us? Is it even a risk? The TLS 1.0 and 1.1, those are much more theoretical than they are practical, right? And PCI rates those as like the worst thing known to mankind. You're like, cool, show me the risk. And they're like, well, it's bad. Why? Well, because, and then they go into this thing where they just say cryptography a bunch, right? So downgrade those, modify those. One of the recommendations I always give when we do these Ask the Expert calls is I have huge lists. I'm giving them to the business unit, the asset owner, whatever it is, and they don't do anything about it. and the reason is they're helpless. If you give them 100 things to fix, which is sometimes a short list, they're going to look at that and be like, look, I can't get through all of those, so I may as well spend time on none of those. The better approach is break it down and be like, look, this month, 3 things. And then they feel like, well, we can fix 3 things. That's easy. Or pick a small number. Don't go above 5, I don't think. Pick the 3 things that you as the security team have said, these are the most critical, let's focus on these. Or if there's something that takes a lot of effort, they get 1 thing. Like, hey, you're going to be doing some stuff with Active Directory? Cool, that's your 1 thing for the next couple of months. And we're not going to give you anything else. And then that way, when they come back to the meeting, we're like, hey, how's it going on that 1 thing? They're like, which one? Right? That doesn't work. They can't hide in amongst everything else. It helps them focus. And if you want to have a lot of fun, gamify it. I've seen it where they've posted the stats for different business units. Hey, you get your 5, you get your 5, you get your 5, you get your 5. Business unit 1 cranks it out, business unit 2 cranks it out, business unit 3 does 4 out of the 5. Guess who's buying drinks in the next round of golf? And the C-levels will give each other crap for some of those kinds of things, right? Especially when you give them a dashboard for it, right? So you can gamify this, a little metagame, right? Use trade-offs. One of the big ones, PCI, this is one of the things I like to pick on PCI, although they have finally fixed it. But for the longest time, a 7-character password was okay. Now with PCI 4, we're finally getting to 12-character. How do I convince my people to move to a longer password? Because what we found with the research is longer is more secure. Rotation works against us. Complexity rules work against us. Make it longer and stop with the rotation. NIST has come out with this, Microsoft has come out with research on this, Google has. There's tons of that's out there. But how do we sell it to the people? And I had one organization who did this best, and I've seen others do that in a similar fashion, is they go to their people like, hey, you've got your 8-character password, and you have to rotate it every 90 days. And you have to have these complexity requirements. And then you're like, hey, look, if we have some volunteers, we would like to set you up with a different policy where it's 14 characters, you don't have to rotate, or you maybe do it once a year, but at no point during a breach has a random password change by Steve or Stephanie kicked Vladimir out of your network, so stop wasting your time with the rotation. But that's a whole different thing. So you with this other policy where it's longer and you get rid of some of these annoying things like, hey, is it the first A I changed to a @ symbol? Is it the second O that's now a 0? Right, we all know the tricks. Is it my secure password because I have what at the very end? Exclamation point. And then people will actually start telling other people. They'll be sitting around the lunchroom like, man, I changed my password again. That was a pain. It's like, well, I don't have to. And this organization, organically, people chose to pick the longer password where they didn't have to do a lot of these things. And what's cool is we're getting more security out of this. We're betterer, aligning with NIST and Google and such, saying stop rotation, stop complexity. So we're getting a double win out of this whole situation. And what we've done is we've sold it to them as, oh, well, you picked this. We have forced a card into their hand. So it's always important here when we design a metric, we design a dashboard, design any of it, is figure out what's important. I've seen organizations, they report the number of blocked emails. You know how you incentivize blocking more emails? Block all emails. Right? Are you blocking the right emails? Are you causing issues with the business because now they're not getting emails? And I mean, so what? They didn't get in. It's like someone's scanning you on the internet. We blocked, have you seen those pew pew maps? That's what we call them. We're like, we blocked 10 million attacks today. And you're like, you blocked 10 million people doing a SYN to one of your Windows systems. Are you better off? What I want to know is, what about the one we didn't block? What about the email that made it through? Right? What about the users who are clicking on things? Better incentives. How quick can we respond to a breach, to an incident? Mean time to response. Not this malarkey, we blocked garbage that didn't actually cause any impact. But if something happened, how quickly can we respond? How early in the kill chain can we kick them out? And incentivize pushing things that way. Incentivize employees reporting phishes, not just clicking, reporting the phishing. Now you're incentivizing people, hey, let us know when something comes through. So are we incentivizing the right things? Are we creating the Cobra effect? Do we have the right things in our dashboards? Are we pushing the right things up to the managers? Are we managing up correctly? Not just patching things for the sake of patching. We need to revisit that, what's important to our organization. Determine how to measure this, and then go back and make sure you're doing it the right way. Because like we saw, incentives are hard. It's really hard to get those right. You're like, you might come up with a great way to incentivize it. Go back and check. Make sure it's not being gamed, and make sure it's giving you the right outputs, right? Has our important to change, has urgent to change, things like that. Any questions, folks? Sorry, I like to keep my talk short. Anybody upset about getting out of here a little bit early? Yeah, no. By the way, pro tip for presenting or doing a talk or anything, never feel like you have to talk the whole time. If you're done in 15 minutes, no one's pissed. redsiege.com/dash, all the slides are there. That's a great point. So the comment here is, hey, a lot of these things that we define as bad, they come from compliance. Compliance is following your policy. Realistically, the policy is the problem. If the policy says we have to fix this because it's a CVSS, blah, 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 the issue isn't the person or the dashboard. The policy is what has created this problem. We need to encourage change at that level. And I'm not saying that's simple, because now we have to go to much higher up get the policy changed to realign the ship so we're actually going in the right direction. But the policy here is absolutely the key, because that's the thing that we're beholden to, because if we're not, then we get written up in reports, and we don't like that.
How do you propose an organization like weight different things they need to take care of? Like using CVSS is nice, even though you shouldn't use it for that. But if you have something where you actually have to like rate each thing for your specific organization, that takes man hours to do. And if you're triaging it to that degree, half the time, why don't you just finish it through now while you have it in your mind, instead of putting it on a stack for someone else to now have to re-context switch into?
Are you saying, when you say follow through, you mean just fix it?
Yeah.
Well, so I get that. But like, let's say I need to patch a system. I have to wait for a maintenance window. I have to go through change control. I have to get the engineers queued up. I have to figure out all the systems that have it. And then I've got all of the time to actually... Okay, so the comment back, which is good, is don't you have to do some of that already to figure out the risk of the organization? Yes, because asset management is a big important piece. But like fundamentally, some of these, there is no sort of risk associated with this. We can, or we can look at it at a higher level, like, hey, let's break down our machines into 3 tiers of criticality. And just for a simple breakdown, so we don't have to go through 10,000 machines or whatever and figure it out, and say, all right, this criticality, what do we rate it at for this risk? This tier of system, what do we rate it at for this? Well, this tier for this, and maybe the bottom 2 tiers we don't actually patch, and we actually patch the top tier, and we kind of triage it, literally, I guess, in that sense.
Just out of curiosity, is there a difference in your mind about mean time to respond, mean time to touch, mean time to determine?
I mean, we can start splitting some of the hairs there. I mean, that would be a big internal. How much of that do you want to? How much do you want to track? How are we tracking that? Are my people now that are responding spending more time responding to the response than actually responding? Right? Because I've seen that before, where you're like, and ask anybody who works in government with pieces of paper with stamps on it. You're like, cool, if I touch this, now I have to fill out paperwork, and then there's paperwork to fill out for the paperwork. So, I mean, there's trade-offs there. I don't have a simple answer for that I can think of on a Wednesday. All right, 2 more, and then we'll get out of here.
How would you approach driving incentives in third parties?
How would you did that just close? Sweet. I guess my laptop is done. See you folks. Now, how do you incentivize third parties? That is the age-old question. I'll tell you what doesn't incentivize is the spreadsheet to save the world, right? Just I get those spreadsheets, and every once in a while in a spreadsheet, I'll give a really terrible answer just to see if somebody calls me. They don't. All they need me to do is fill out the spreadsheet, and I think they just ignore it. Maybe you score them and you give them a preferred vendor status for different things. Now, I get that some are like, you're the only person that does this, so we don't really have a choice. I don't know. And you can make a lot of money figuring that one out.
So on the previous answer, splitting the hairs of getting down to what matters to you, it just reminded me of a time that I sat down with my manager, right, as the blue team lead. Drew line, hey, this is your timeline. Here are all the metrics that we can pull out. Some of these we don't have capability to yet. Which ones do you? And we finally tailored the dashboard to like, oh yeah, you do care about mean time to identify versus bond or contain, or right. But that way we're all on the same page, right? Pick the ones that we care about, and then made the dashboard. But I think that's your final bullet point. Like, measure the ones that make sense to you.
Yeah, measure what makes sense to you, and then check to make sure that it's actually causing the action. Because mean time to identify is like, cool, I found it. Check the box, get a raise. Now, did I do anything about that? Well, no one's checking up on me on that, right? And you don't want to have too many for every single step, because then you end up with the meta paperwork for those kinds of things. But you come back and be like, okay, are we getting what we expect out of this truly, versus hey, we're measuring this, we're getting better. Yeah, but are we missing other steps? Are we missing other key pieces? Cool. All right, folks. Thank you so much for coming. If you want to talk pen test, come to the booth. We have shirts, we have hats.